Once you've marked your shots, you're ready to start building your sequence. There are a few ways you can start a sequence. The first one, which we explored in Chapter 2, was to just drag and drop your footage right into the timeline, which prompts Premiere Pro to create a sequence automatically. So I'll do that right now to demonstrate with my sound bites here. I'm just going to select these, and then instead of bringing them up to my source monitor, I'm going to bring them straight into my timeline. So I'll bring them over, and you can see that a sequence has been created. Let's bring that up to Sequence Examples, and I'll rename this Bakery Sequence Demo 1. And what this has done is it's created a sequence with the sequence settings based on the very first clip that I dragged in. So you do have to be careful about this. You don't want to drag in an SD file of some archival footage and throw it in your HD project as the very first clip. It simply won't match the rest of the majority of the clips in your sequence. So be careful there. But again, this is the easiest way to set up a sequence because basically it just takes your existing footage and creates the sequence settings based on that. If you need to check your sequence settings, you just come up to Sequence and then Sequence Settings, and then take a look at all of the characteristics of these sequence settings based on the first clip that you dragged in. Okay? Another way to set up a sequence is to predetermine what your sequence settings are ahead of time. And this is important if the sequence settings absolutely need to be set up in a certain way. For example, when I go on site to television stations and train them in Premiere Pro, they have a very specific setting that they've got to work at, all right? So that's when you predetermine your sequence settings. To do that, you can right-click in the project panel and choose New Item and then Sequence, keyboard shortcut Command-N or Control-N on a PC. And then this window pops up and it can look a little daunting. There are tons of predetermined presets over here on the left that you can use to dial in your specific sequence settings. Or you can come to this middle window and set up a custom group of settings through these various drop-down menus. Now, I do happen to know my sequence settings for the media that I'm working with in my Ovens of Capcoin project, so I'll set that up now. Under editing mode, I'm going to choose RA Cinema, and then our time base is 23976. Frame size is 1920 by 1080. We're going to go to square pixels and no fields. All right, so these sequence settings define my media. I'm going to say OK. We'll bring this back up to our sequence examples bin, and I'm going to call this Bakery Sequence Demo 2. Okay, so right now this is an empty sequence. There's nothing in it. But if I bring in my clips like so, you can see my clips go right in. Now, if my settings didn't match, then Premiere would tell me that, and it would ask me if I would like to keep my current settings or convert the settings to match the clips that I brought in. Let me show you what that would look like. I'm just going to, again, create a new sequence. I'm going to right-click and choose New Item, Sequence, and I'm not going to change anything. So I'll name this down here. I'm going to call this Bakery Sequence Demo 3, and I'll say OK. And let's bring that right into the same bin here. All right. And now we'll go ahead and bring our clips over. All right. And release. And here it recognizes that there is a settings mismatch. This clip does not match the sequence settings. Do you want to change the sequence to match the clip settings? Now, there are some scenarios where you say, no, actually, I do need to keep my existing settings. But in this case, I would want to change the sequence settings. So I'll select that option, the sequence settings adjust to match my clips, and now everything matches perfectly. All right, so far we've had 3 scenarios. The first scenario is where we let Premiere Pro determine our sequence settings based on the very first clip that we edited into the timeline. The second one is where we predetermined our sequence settings and everything matched up perfectly. The third scenario is where there was a settings mismatch, and then Premiere Pro went ahead and matched my sequence settings back to my media. Now, I want to show you one more method, and that is by using this button down here called New Item. This is basically the same New Item command that we used before when we just right-clicked in our project panel. If I was to click on this and then choose Sequence, you can see that the New Sequence dialog box gets brought up, and we can go in and determine either a preset or a group of settings, just like I showed you before. That's not what I want to do here. I'm going to cancel. And instead, I'm going to take my clip or clips and then drag them right on top of this button. And then when I do that, you can see that automatically I get a new sequence created. So I'm again going to just drag this right into my sequence examples bin, and I'm going to call this Bakery Sequence Demo 4. Oh, and I accidentally pluralized these, so let me just fix that. All right, so for this example, the video settings are determined by the first clip that I dragged onto this new item command. So in this case, because I selected good bread first and then shift selected, and then brought that over to new item, this sequence matches the properties of this clip here, good bread. All right, so if you're okay with Premiere setting up your sequence settings based on your video properties, this is a really nice option, especially if you've already got sequences loaded in your timeline, okay? So instead of dragging and dropping into an empty timeline, when there is no empty timeline, you can just drag and drop right on this new item command. All right, so creating sequences is easy in Premiere, and depending on your workflow, you can let Premiere set up your settings based on your media, or you can have more control over the process by setting the sequence settings up yourself.